Sometimes I think Chicago winters were easier than living with my own family. Even on the coldest February mornings, when the lake wind cut straight through your bones, there was a kind of honesty in the chill. But the day I walked into Cook County Courthouse, early spring 2021, I would have traded anything for a blizzard to hide behind. Instead, I was left with the stale scent of burnt coffee and lemon floor polish, the two bright courthouse lights flickering above me, and my heart thudding in my chest like it was trying to get free. I reached into my purse and touched Grandpa's old silver hair clip. The metal was worn smooth from years of fidgeting in church pews, long drives, waiting rooms. It reminded me of a time when he was still here, when I still belonged somewhere. Some things don't change, no matter how hard you try to forget or forgive. The summons had arrived on a Thursday, tucked between grocery coupons and a water bill. I wasn't surprised to see my name in print. What shocked me was the word witness in bold, not beneficiary. My stomach twisted, but I showed up anyway, wanting, maybe needing, to believe this was some clerical mistake. Inside the courthouse, the marble floors echoed with every uncertain step I took. I passed people clutching folders to their chests, some whispering anxiously, others looking as lost as I felt. Outside, spring tried to break through with a pale blue sky and the first stubborn crocuses, but in here, it was just fluorescent and gray. My family was already gathered near courtroom 4. Linda, my mother, crisp and pressed in her navy blazer. Julia, my older sister, scrolling her phone, pretending I didn't exist. And my father, Edward, gazing at the wall as if he'd only just noticed it needed painting. They didn't greet me, didn't even nod. I might as well have been invisible. In that moment, I realized, maybe I'd always been. I took a seat 2 rows behind them, close enough to hear, far enough to keep my dignity. For a fleeting moment, the old house flashed in my mind, Grandpa's voice echoing down the hall, faded family photos lining the dark-paneled walls, the ghost of laughter from long-ago block parties where we'd roast marshmallows on borrowed grills. I swallowed hard, missing a time when family meant comfort instead of confrontation. The judge arrived, his robe barely rustling as he took his seat. "The matter of Samuel Reyes's estate," he announced. The lawyer began reading the will. I held my breath as names were listed. My mother. My sister. Not mine. Not even a mention except as witness to the signature. Julia's lips curved in something like satisfaction, my mother's jaw set with iron resolve. A cold weight settled in my stomach. I looked at my hands, then back at the page as the clerk held up the document for the judge. My signature was there, scrawled and strange, but something was off. The middle initial was wrong. I never used T in my name, and anyone who knew me would have caught that. My pulse hammered as I stood. "Excuse me, Your Honor, but that isn't my signature," I said, voice shaking despite my best effort. The courtroom seemed to shrink, everyone turning to stare. My mother barely glanced at me. "Natalie, don't make a scene," she hissed, loud enough for the front row to hear. "But it's not mine," I repeated, louder now. "I never signed that. You know I didn't." A whisper spread through the pews, strangers, neighbors, even Mrs. Delgado from down the block, who must have come just to witness the spectacle. The judge's gaze was steady. "We'll address the issue in due course," he said, but the matter was swept aside, as if my words had been nothing more than dust on the courtroom floor. Linda leaned close, her perfume sharp, her voice even sharper. "Not everything is about you, Natalie. Sit down before you embarrass yourself." I caught Julia's eye, but she looked away, her loyalty already chosen. The judge called for a short recess, his gavel echoing through the room. For a moment, no one moved. Then, in the strained silence, my mother's hand shot out quicker than I expected, angrier than I'd ever seen. Her palm cracked across my cheek. A gasp rippled through the gallery, as sharp as the sting blooming on my skin. I didn't cry. I didn't even touch my face. I stood there, my mother glaring, my sister wide-eyed, my father frozen. If love is supposed to hurt, no one tells you it stings like betrayal more than any slap could. Someone in the back muttered, "She never deserved any of it, anyway." The words landed harder than the blow. I walked out into the hall, cheek burning, eyes hot, but held my head high. In the pocket of my coat, my fingers found the old hair clip again. I gripped it until the shape pressed into my palm, grounding me in the memory of Grandpa's soft voice, his quiet faith. "You're stronger than you know," he'd said once, brushing my hair back before dinner. I wasn't sure it was true, but today I needed to believe it. The courthouse doors hissed shut behind me, and for a second, the city felt too big, too cold. But I kept walking, not knowing what would come next, only that I couldn't go back. After the slap, I walked out of the courthouse with my head held high, a practiced pride I wore like armor. But when the door swung shut behind me and the voices faded, the truth settled deep in my chest. I felt more alone than ever. The city's traffic murmured, and the early spring breeze nipped at my cheeks, but the ache inside me was raw and private, a bruise that wouldn't show. I caught the train home, numb, watching the same neighborhoods slide by through smudged windows. As I let myself into my tiny apartment, the familiar clutter greeted me, unpaid bills in a leaning stack, a kitchen sink holding the remains of last night's mac and cheese, a window cracked just enough for the cold to seep in. I kicked off my shoes and dropped my bag. For a long moment, I simply stood there, letting the quiet fill every corner. I reached into my coat pocket and drew out Grandpa's letter, one I'd carried for years, edges soft, his handwriting looping across the page. He used to say, "Quiet hands build the strongest homes." I wondered if he'd still be proud of me now, or if he'd shake his head, disappointed at how lost I'd become. I dialed my parents. The phone rang and rang. No answer. Julia's text came in, clipped and cold. "Mom doesn't want to talk." "Let it go, Nat." I stared at the screen. It was always easier for them to pretend I wasn't there at all. I made myself a mug of tea and sat by the window, looking out at the street below. The light shifted, making Grandpa's words on the page glow softly. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, and the world kept moving without me. There was a knock at my door. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but then I recognized Mrs. Delgado's silhouette through the frosted glass. I opened up, and she bustled in, arms full, a plate of lemon bars wrapped in foil and her usual warmth. "You look like you could use some sugar," she said, setting the plate down and giving me a quick, gentle squeeze around the shoulders. I smiled in spite of myself. "It's been a day." She poured coffee for both of us, sliding the mug across my old kitchen table. The cinnamon and vanilla scents from her baking filled the air. For a while, we just sat, sharing the kind of silence only old neighbors know how to keep. My brother and I didn't speak for 15 years after Mama passed, Mrs. Delgado said, breaking the quiet. Family can be the sharpest knife or the softest pillow, depending on the day. I listened, grateful for the comfort, and tried to believe that wounds like mine could one day soften at the edges. She patted my hand. "Don't let them turn you to stone, Natalie. You're not built for bitterness." I nodded, too close to tears to trust my voice. When she left, she pressed a lemon bar into my hand. "Something sweet for later," she said. I watched her disappear down the hall, feeling the weight of her words linger. That night, as I started to clear the table, I noticed a thick envelope wedged among the junk mail, postmarked from Arizona, and Marcia's neat handwriting on the front. I tore it open, breath-catching. Inside was a letter from Grandpa, dated 2 years before he died, a faded photocopy of an older will, and a yellow sticky note. "Look for what doesn't fit." Grandpa's words were steady and familiar. He'd written about the house, the years we'd spent together, and the importance of honesty. Reading it, I felt a knot of grief and gratitude twist together inside me. Aunt Marcia's note was brief but urgent. "Natalie, compare the signatures. Trust your gut." I set the documents side by side under the lamp. The signature on the old will was unmistakably Grandpa's, sharp, rising at the end. The version in court was flat, mechanical, with a notary stamp dated after his passing. My own name appeared as a witness, but the handwriting was clumsy, my middle initial wrong. Determined, I rifled through my file box, old leases, bank forms, my college diploma. Each one bore my real signature, Natalie S. Reyes. Never a T. I compared the court document to my driver's license, my voter registration, even a faded receipt from a Target run 3 years ago. All matched. The will did not. I felt a slow anger rise. Someone close had done this, someone who knew me, but not well enough to get the smallest details right. The next day, unable to sit still, I walked to the neighborhood cafe for a cinnamon donut and a little peace. The place was busy, the air full of chatter and the thump of espresso machines. I took my coffee to a corner table, set out Grandpa's letter, and tried to think. At the next table, 2 women talked in low voices about a cousin who had changed the paperwork after Uncle died. I listened, their words painting a picture of secrets and betrayal that sounded too familiar. That's when it hit me. Families can rewrite stories, but paper remembers. I sipped my coffee, heart pounding, and made a list of every document I'd ever signed, determined to find proof that would hold up. Late that night, back in my apartment, I found it, a notarized rental agreement from years ago. There was my signature, clear and clean, middle initial S, and the notary's name matching a stamp I knew by heart. Comparing it to the witness line on Grandpa's will, the difference was glaring. I had what I needed. Someone had forged my name. My phone buzzed, breaking the quiet. I almost ignored it, but something in me was ready to hear from the past. A Chicago number. I answered, cautious. "Natalie? It's Derek. We need to talk. It's about your grandfather." For a moment, the room seemed to tilt, the floor uncertain under my feet. I looked at Grandpa's letter propped on the windowsill, letting the sunrise spill gold over his words, a new promise every morning. Sometimes, I think loneliness is just a season, a cold one, yes, but not endless. That night, with proof in my hands and old wounds aching, I realized I wasn't as alone as I thought. Somewhere, the truth was waiting to be spoken. And this time, I wasn't letting go. If time heals all wounds, no one told my family. The clock kept ticking, but old hurts just festered beneath the surface, quiet, waiting. Yet, maybe Derek could help me stitch up some of the past, if I let him. We met at our old coffee shop downtown, the one with cracked leather chairs and the best cinnamon rolls in Chicago. The smell of espresso and worn books filled the air as I slid into the booth across from him. Derek's face was familiar but weathered, eyes still holding that steady calm that had once grounded me. There was tension. Sure, years of silence and unspoken apologies hung between us, but beneath it, a shared purpose. "I've been keeping an eye on things," he said quietly. "Grandpa trusted me to help with the finances toward the end. I noticed some irregularities even then." He pulled a worn leather folder from his bag and opened it carefully. Digital copies, scans of wills, bank statements, stuff they don't want anyone else to see. I leaned in, heart pounding, as he showed me the files. We spent the afternoon poring over documents, comparing signatures and dates, noting every discrepancy. The official we'd seen in court had a middle initial that didn't belong, T instead of S. The notary's stamp was dated weeks after Grandpa passed. Every detail pointed to fraud. Later, we walked side by side to the public records office, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and the scent of musty paper thick in the air. Clerk Morrison, a kind woman with silver hair and glasses perched on her nose, greeted us with a knowing look. She fetched the archived wills and permits, giving us quiet space to examine the originals. Hours passed as we scrutinized every page. I felt like a detective in a story I never wanted to be part of, but Derek's steady presence made the wait easier to bear. That evening, my phone buzzed with a call from Aunt Marcia. Her voice was low but urgent. "Natalie, I found something in the archives, proof they can't ignore. We need to bring this to light." Just before she hung up, there was a soft knock at my door. Mrs. Delgado was there, holding a basket of oranges wrapped in cellophane and a note tied with a ribbon. "Courage is sweeter than revenge," it read. Her warm smile reminded me that even in the darkest storms, small kindnesses shine brightest. Back at my apartment, I placed Derek's folder on the coffee table. Among the papers, I found an old prom photo tucked inside, a picture of me smiling beside Grandpa on that porch swing, his arm draped around my shoulder. The past wasn't gone, it was just waiting to be reclaimed. Derek looked at me then, eyes steady and unwavering. "You're not alone in this. Tomorrow we go to court together." For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. The courthouse never felt colder. Not the biting Chicago winter outside, with its sharp wind that cut through coats and scarves like a knife. No, this cold was different, an ice that crept in from inside, from the stairs of my own family, sharper and more cutting than any weather could be. I stood just inside the heavy doors of Cook County Courthouse in early winter 2024, my fingers fidgeting with Grandpa's old silver hair clip tucked beneath the cuff of my coat. It was worn smooth from years of use, a talisman I'd carried through more than one storm. Grandpa used to squeeze my shoulder before every big test and say, "You're stronger than you think." Those words felt like a lifeline now, and I clung to them as if they could shield me from what was about to come. Behind me, Derek walked steadily, carrying a slim folder stuffed with documents that were about to shake the very foundation of my family's lies. His presence was calm, a silent anchor amid the tension that hung thick in the courthouse air. The dry cold made everyone's breath visible, little clouds of doubt and fear mingling with the faint scent of lemon polish that seemed to linger on the marble floors. Inside the courtroom, Linda sat poised like a statue, perfect hair, perfect suit, and a smile that never reached her eyes. Julia, my older sister, was scrolling through her phone, occasionally glancing up with a smugness that felt like a slap all its own. Edward, my father, avoided everyone's gaze, his posture stiff and withdrawn, like a man who had given up even before the battle began. The judge, Cortez, entered with a measured calm, his robes whispering against the polished floor. The hearing was called to order, and the gallery grew quiet, anticipation tightening the air. Linda launched into her rehearsed narrative, weaving a story designed to cast me as a troublemaker, a bitter daughter trying to claim what wasn't hers. Julia smirked, casting sidelong glances, while Edward sat silent, distant. When my turn came, I stood, clutching the folder like a shield, and presented the evidence that had taken months to gather: mismatched signatures on the will, notary dates stamped weeks after Grandpa's passing, and the original letter from Grandpa himself, found by Aunt Marcia and carefully preserved. I spoke slowly, each word deliberate, as the courtroom listened in stunned silence. Derek took the stand, his voice steady and unwavering as he recounted the financial dealings he'd managed for Grandpa in those last months. He explained how he'd kept digital copies of all key documents, watched for signs of trouble, and how the forged will was a betrayal not just to me but to Grandpa's legacy. Murmurs rose in the gallery, whispers swelling into a tide of realization. Julia's smugness faltered, Linda's face tightened, and Edward's jaw clenched. I felt a quiet surge of confidence, of vindication not just for the papers, but for the years of silence and exclusion. Then, just as the weight of truth piled high and the judge prepared to make his ruling, Linda's composure shattered. In a moment of fury that shocked the courtroom, she raised her hand and slapped me across the face. The sharp crack echoed off the walls, gasps rising like a wave. The judge slammed his gavel, calling for order as stunned silence fell. "This hearing is recessed immediately," he declared, voice firm. "An investigation will be launched at once. All estate actions are hereby frozen pending review." My cheek burned, but it wasn't just from the slap. It was the humiliation, the betrayal, the knowledge that this fight was far from over. As I studied myself, Derek reached out and gently helped me to my feet. His eyes met mine, silently offering strength when words felt hollow. Behind me, I caught Julia's whisper, sharp and cold as ice. "This isn't over. Nat family never forgets." I looked down and saw my hair clip lying on the floor where it had fallen during the slap. Derek bent to pick it up, fingers brushing mine as he returned it. No words were spoken, but the message was clear. He had me. The courthouse doors closed behind us, muffling the noise of the world outside, but I felt a fire ignite inside, a fierce determination to reclaim not just what was mine, but the truth itself. The day after court, news spread through the neighborhood faster than spring rain on hot pavement. I woke up to a flood of messages and missed calls, some filled with cautious support, others thick with whispered judgments and sideways glances that I could almost hear over the phone. It was the kind of attention that feels like you're naked under a cold spotlight, and yet, strangely, I welcomed it. Finally, the silence had been broken. Aunt Marcia stopped by late that morning, carrying a steaming coffee and a thick envelope. Her eyes held the kind of quiet strength I'd leaned on all these years. "The court ruled," she said gently, handing me the papers. "The contested will is void. You're the sole beneficiary." The words settled like soft sunlight on my skin, warm and real. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Delgado invited me to her porch, where the scent of fresh lemon bars mingled with the gentle hum of neighborhood gossip. As she poured lemonade into a tall glass, she looked me in the eye and said, "Winning doesn't heal every wound, Natalie. Sometimes it just clears the air to see the dust settle." Her words reminded me that justice is never as clean or simple as we hope. Derek came over soon after, and together we started clearing out Grandpa's old house. Each room was a treasure trove of faded memories, letters yellowed with age, birthday cards scrawled with Grandpa's shaky handwriting, and a wooden recipe box filled with family favorites. As I held each item, a small heartbreak echoed through me. These weren't just objects. They were pieces of a life I was fighting to reclaim. My phone buzzed with another message from Julia, sharp and bitter. "You ruined everything, Nat," she wrote, her words stabbing deeper than any slap. My mother and father remained silent, their absence the coldest punishment of all. That night, overwhelmed by a storm of emotions, I sat alone in the quiet living room, clutching Grandpa's hair clip. Tears slipped quietly down my cheeks, not from defeat, but from the release of years of pain. Derek sat beside me, his presence steady and comforting. He didn't offer solutions, didn't try to fix the unfixable. Instead, he simply said, "You didn't ruin this, Nat. You survived it." Just as the room seemed to settle, a letter arrived, no return address, only a single line written inside. "I hope someday you forgive me." The handwriting was unmistakably my father's. I placed the recipe box and an old prom photo of me and Grandpa on the mantel. For the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope. I vowed to make that house a place of warmth, not ghosts. The house looked different now, bathed in sunlight streaming through every window, soft and golden like a promise. For the first time in a long while, I didn't see shadows or memories that clenched my chest. I saw possibility rooms waiting to be filled with laughter, walls ready to hold new stories instead of old grudges. Grandpa's voice echoed in my mind, the memory sharp and warm. "A home is what you give away, not what you keep locked up." Those words felt like a key, unlocking more than just the front door. Spring of 2024 had arrived at the Reyes house, painting the yard in fresh blooms and washing the faded paint into fresh white. I had spent weeks restoring it, but today was special. The porch was set with lemon bars, fresh coffee steaming in ceramic mugs, and little glass bowls filled with mint leaves and sliced lemons for lemonade. The air was filled with the scent of blooming jasmine and the hum of neighborhood life just beyond the picket fence. One by one, guests arrived, Aunt Marcia with her warm smile, Mrs. Delgado carrying another batch of her famous lemon bars, Derek with a shy grin and a bouquet of wildflowers he swore he didn't pick, but somehow ended up with anyway. 2 women from the local inheritance support group joined, fresh faces with stories much like mine, starting over with quiet strength. Neighborhood kids darted through the yard, their laughter weaving through the music and chatter. I found myself laughing more than I had in years, the heaviness in my chest lifting as voices filled the house and spilled onto the porch. Derek helped me plant flowers along the front walkway, teasing me gently about my complete lack of a green thumb. "If you keep killing plants, at least do it with style," he joked, and I couldn't help but smile. As the sun began to set, I stepped inside, my heart full and my spirit lighter. I slipped into the kitchen, sat down at the worn table, and pulled out a sheet of paper. With deliberate care, I began writing a letter to my future self, a reminder of survival, hope, and the strength that comes from reclaiming your own story. I tucked Grandpa's silver hair clip inside the envelope, a small talisman of all I had endured and all I hoped to become. This letter, this clip, they were my new traditions, a quiet way of honoring the past without letting it hold me hostage. Later, standing on the porch, I gazed at the old house. It was mine now, not a battleground or a prison, but a home. The weight of years lifted with the cool evening breeze, and for the first time, I breathed easy. The past was there, sure, but it no longer controlled me. As the last guests said their goodbyes and disappeared down the street, Derek lingered beside me on the porch steps. He looked out at the yard, then back at me, his voice soft and steady. "You ever think about second chances?" I smiled, feeling the hope bloom inside me like the flowers at our feet. "I'm starting to." The night wrapped around us, full of quiet promise. I placed the letter and the hair clip in the family recipe box, a new home for old memories and fresh beginnings. My own ending, my own start. The sunlight filtered through the windows of the old house, bringing warmth to the memories that had been forgotten. I realized that no matter how many challenges there are, family is always the strongest bond, one that needs to be cherished and preserved. In life, if we know how to listen and forgive each other, no matter how deep the wound is, it can be healed in its own way. Love is not always easy, but it always finds a way back to each other. If this story touches you, I hope you will share your thoughts or experiences so that love and understanding continue to spread throughout our community.